The November rain hammered against the windows of the Pentagon's classified briefing wing, each drop striking the reinforced glass like accusations. Lieutenant Ava Hart stood in the sterile corridor outside Conference Room 7 Alpha, her dress blues immaculate despite the storm she'd walked through to get here. Water still beaded on her cover, which she held precisely at her side. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that particular shade of institutional white that made time feel suspended. She'd received the summons 72 hours ago. No explanation, no context, just coordinates, a time, and a security clearance verification code that had made the communications officer who processed it go pale. Ava had seen that reaction before. The moment when someone realized they were handling documents that existed in a realm beyond normal classification. Documents that, if leaked, wouldn't just end careers. They'd rewrite the geopolitical landscape. The door opened with a pneumatic hiss. A young ensign, barely old enough to shave, gestured her inside without making eye contact. "Lieutenant Hart, they're ready for you." The conference room was exactly what she expected. Windowless, soundproofed, with walls that probably contained enough signal-blocking technology to create a dead zone for every electronic device within 50 feet. 3 people sat at the far end of a mahogany table that had witnessed countless decisions that would never appear in history books. But only one of them mattered. Admiral Theodore Bancroft. Ava recognized him immediately from his reputation, which preceded him like thunder before lightning. Bancroft was Old Navy, 58 years of service, 3 wars, and a chest full of medals that told only the sanitized version of his story. His face was weathered like aged leather, with deep lines carved by decades of command decisions and salt spray. He wore his rank like armor, and his eyes held that particular hardness that came from sending young men and women into situations where many wouldn't return. He didn't stand when she entered. Neither did the 2 captains flanking him. A man with wire-rimmed glasses who looked more accountant than warrior, and a woman with steel-gray hair pulled back so tight it seemed to pull her features into a permanent expression of skepticism. "Lieutenant Hart," Bancroft said, his voice carrying the gravel of 1,000 cigarettes smoked on carrier decks. He gestured dismissively at the empty chair across from him. "Sit." Ava sat, placing her cover on the table with practiced precision. She kept her posture perfect, her expression neutral. Years of training had taught her that in rooms like this, everything was a test. Bancroft was already reading from a manila folder, her personnel file. She assumed. The standard one. The one that told the acceptable version of her story. "Lieutenant Ava Marie Hart," he read aloud, making each word sound like an indictment. 29 years old. Naval Academy, class of 2018. Graduated middle of your class. Nothing spectacular. Initial assignment to the USS Roosevelt as a junior intelligence officer. Adequate performance reviews. Nothing that stands out. He looked up, his eyes flat and unimpressed. Transferred to shore duty at Norfolk after 2 years. Spent 18 months pushing papers in signals analysis. Then another transfer, this time to a logistics unit in San Diego. He closed the folder with a decisive snap, the sound echoing in the silent room. "Tell me, Lieutenant, what exactly makes you think you belong in this room? Your record reads like someone who's been trying very hard to avoid attention. Mediocre assignments. No combat decorations. No commendations for exceptional service. Hell, you haven't even been recommended for promotion ahead of schedule." He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. "So, why are you here, wasting my time and the time of 2 captains who have actual important work to do?" The captain with the glasses shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. The woman remained motionless, her eyes fixed on Ava with an intensity that suggested she was cataloging every micro-expression, every breath. Ava had expected this. In fact, she'd been trained for exactly this scenario. The contempt was part of the protocol, a final test to see if she'd break operational security, if she'd defend herself by revealing information that should remain buried. She kept her face carefully neutral, her voice steady. "I'm here because I was ordered to be here, sir. As for my qualifications, I believe my complete file would answer your questions more thoroughly than I'm authorized to do in this setting." Bancroft's eyes narrowed. "Your complete file? Lieutenant, I'm looking at your complete file. This is everything the Navy has on you, and it's underwhelming. With respect, sir, that's a standard personnel file. I believe there may be additional documentation that requires. Additional documentation? Bancroft interrupted, his voice rising with irritation. What are you talking about? Some kind of classified annex? Do you think you're special, Lieutenant? Do you think you're somehow operating above your pay grade? He turned to the captain with glasses. Morrison, did we miss something? Did some file get lost in the bureaucracy? Captain Morrison cleared his throat. Sir, the requisition request came through proper channels. Lieutenant Hart was specifically requested for this evaluation. The originating office used correct protocols and authentication codes. Requested by whom? Bancroft demanded. Morrison hesitated, glancing at the woman captain, who gave the slightest shake of her head. That information is compartmentalized, sir. Bancroft's face flushed red. Compartmentalized? Captain, I'm a 4-star admiral. I have clearances that go back to operations most people in this building don't even know existed. I've been briefed on programs that would make your hair fall out. And you're telling me that some request for an evaluation of a junior officer, a nobody junior officer, is compartmentalized above my level. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Ava remained perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. She knew what was coming. It always came down to this moment. The moment when the standard military hierarchy collided with the reality of programs that existed in the shadows, programs that operated with authorities that superseded normal chains of command. Bancroft turned his attention back to Ava, and now there was genuine anger in his eyes. You know what I think, Lieutenant? I think this is some kind of bureaucratic mistake. I think someone put your name in the wrong database, or copied the wrong file, or sent the wrong person to the wrong meeting. Because there is no way, no conceivable way, that someone with your unremarkable record would be requested specifically for anything that requires this level of security theater. He reached for a file again, flipping it open with aggressive casualness. Let's see if we missed anything. Ava Marie Hart, born in Portland, Oregon. Father was a high school teacher. Mother was a nurse. No military family background. Joined Navy ROTC in college, apparently because you want to see the world or serve your country, or whatever idealistic reason young people give these days. He was reading faster now, his tone dripping with sarcasm. No disciplinary issues. Congratulations, you managed to follow basic rules. No significant achievements. No rescue operations. No critical intelligence discoveries. No innovations in procedure or protocol. You're exactly what you appear to be, an average officer who's managed to stay under the radar by being completely, thoroughly ordinary. He turned another page and then another, his fingers moving with practice efficiency through the standard sections, training records, fitness reports, security clearances, all of it confirming his assessment, all of it supporting his conclusion that Ava Hart was, indeed, exactly what she appeared to be. And then he turned the last page. The change was instantaneous and profound. Bancroft's face went from flushed red to bone white in the span of a single heartbeat. His fingers, which had been flipping pages with dismissive casualness, suddenly froze. His eyes widened and narrowed, then widened again as he read and reread what was printed there. The silence in the room became absolute, stamped across the final page in deep crimson ink, with authentication codes and security classifications that made everything else in the file look like a kindergarten permission slip, was a designation that almost no one in the United States military had ever seen in person. Top secret, Ghost Fleet Special Access required compartmented information unauthorized disclosure subject to prosecution under 18 U.S.C. Section 798. Below it, in smaller but no less official text, authorized personnel only Presidential Directive 47 Echo Joint Special Access Program oversight. Classified. Bancroft's hands were shaking. Actually shaking. Captain Morrison had gone pale, and the woman captain, who had maintained her composure throughout the entire meeting, was now sitting rigidly upright, her eyes locked on that crimson seal. Ava watched Bancroft's face cycle through emotions. Shock, confusion, disbelief, and then, finally, something that looked like fear. Real fear. The kind that came from suddenly realizing you've been operating with incomplete information, that you've been making assumptions about reality that were fundamentally wrong. Ghost Fleet, Bancroft whispered, the words barely audible. His eyes lifted from the file to Ava's face, and for the first time since she'd entered the room, he was really seeing her, not as a junior officer, not as an unremarkable lieutenant, but as something else entirely, something that existed in a realm of operations so classified that even admirals weren't fully briefed. The designation made sense of everything that hadn't made sense. The compartmentalized requisition, the security protocols, the way Morrison and his colleague had handled her summons with such careful precision. Ghost Fleet wasn't just classified. It was the kind of program that people in the intelligence community spoke about in hushed tones, if they spoke about it at all. There were only 3 reasons someone would have Ghost Fleet access. The first was that they were part of the program's command structure, the handful of flag officers and civilian leaders who oversaw operations that, if exposed, would fundamentally alter the balance of power in multiple theaters of operation. The second was that they were assigned to Ghost Fleet as operational personnel, specialists, pilots, commanders of assets that officially didn't exist, conducting missions that would never be acknowledged. The third and rarest was if they were something else entirely. Intelligence assets, deep cover operatives, people whose real work was so far removed from their official records that their entire military career was essentially an elaborate cover story. Bancroft set the file down carefully, as if it might explode. When he spoke again, his voice had completely changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that sounded like carefully controlled panic. "Lieutenant Hart," he said slowly, I need to verify this designation. I need to contact. "Sir," Captain Morrison interrupted gently, "protocol requires that we accept the designation as authenticated. The code checkout. The seals are legitimate, and any attempt to verify through unauthorized channels would constitute a security breach." Bancroft looked like he wanted to argue, but the training of 58 years in the military was too deeply ingrained. When you saw a classification like Ghost Fleet, you didn't ask questions. You didn't make phone calls. You certainly didn't continue treating the person with that designation as if they were ordinary. He stood up slowly, and the 2 captains followed suit. Ava remained seated, watching as the power dynamic in the room completely inverted. "Lieutenant," Bancroft said, his voice now carefully respectful, we weren't fully briefed on the nature of this evaluation. If you could provide us with the proper protocols for proceeding." Ava allowed herself the smallest of smiles. "Admiral, I appreciate your concern for proper procedure. The evaluation will continue as originally scheduled. However, I'll need to speak with you privately. Captains Morrison and Rodriguez, you're dismissed. What we discuss from this point forward is compartmented above your clearance levels." The 2 captains didn't hesitate. They gathered their materials and left the room without a word, the door sealing behind them with that same pneumatic hiss. Now it was just Ava and Admiral Bancroft. Ava stood, retrieving her cover from the table. "Admiral, let me be clear about something. My standard personnel file is accurate. I did graduate in the middle of my class. I did serve on the Roosevelt. I did work in signals analysis and logistics. Every detail you read is true, but none of it tells the real story," Bancroft said quietly. "No, sir, it doesn't." The rain had intensified by the time Bancroft sealed the conference room for maximum security protocol. He activated additional countermeasures, systems that Ava knew would create multiple layers of signal interference, making it impossible for anyone to listen in, even with the most sophisticated surveillance technology. The soft hum of white noise generators filled the spaces between their words, creating a bubble of privacy in the heart of the Pentagon. Bancroft had aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. He stood by the window that wasn't really a window, just a sophisticated screen displaying a real-time feed of the exterior, and stared out at the simulated rain, as if trying to reconcile everything he thought he knew with this new reality. "How long?" he finally asked, not turning around. "How long have you been Ghost Fleet?" Ava remained standing, her posture at ease but alert. "Since 3 months after I graduated from the academy, sir. My assignment to the Roosevelt was real, but it was also covered for my recruitment phase. They were watching me the entire time, evaluating whether I had the temperament and skills for something beyond conventional service. And the signals analysis? The logistics work in San Diego. Training. Ava said simply. Ghost Fleet doesn't just recruit people and throw them into operations. The program is too sensitive, the stakes too high. They spend years preparing you, testing you, building your cover identity, while simultaneously teaching you skills that don't appear in any Navy manual. Bancroft turned to face her, his expression a mixture of frustration and grudging respect. I've been in the Navy for almost 6 decades, Lieutenant. I've commanded carrier groups. I've been briefed on black programs that would make the average citizen's head spin. I've signed non-disclosure agreements that could land me in prison for life if I breathed a word of what I know. And all that time, I've heard Ghost Fleet mentioned maybe twice, always in the context of rumors, speculation, the kind of thing people talk about when they've had too many drinks and start discussing conspiracy theories. That's by design, sir, Ava said. Ghost Fleet works because people think it's a myth. Even most intelligence professionals believe it's just a legend, something that might have existed during the Cold War, but was decommissioned decades ago. The truth is more complicated. Tell me, Bancroft said, moving back to the table and sitting down heavily. And that's not a request, Lieutenant. If I'm going to complete this evaluation, whatever this evaluation is really about, I need to understand what I'm dealing with. Ava sat down across from him, her movements deliberate and controlled. She'd been trained for this conversation, too, though every Ghost Fleet operator hoped they'd never have to have it, revealing the program, even to a 4-star admiral with top-level clearances, went against every instinct that had been drilled into her over the past 7 years. But the seal in her file meant that someone higher up the chain, much higher, had authorized this disclosure. Someone had decided that Admiral Bancroft needed to know, at least partially, what Ghost Fleet really was. Ghost Fleet began as a response to a specific problem. Ava began, her voice taking on the cadence of someone who'd memorized his history, even though it appeared in no official record. In the late 1990s, senior intelligence analysts realized that the United States was facing a new kind of threat, one that our conventional military and intelligence structures weren't equipped to handle. Nation-states were developing capabilities that existed in the gray zone between war and peace. Cyber warfare, economic manipulation, covert operations conducted through proxies, information warfare designed to destabilize societies without firing a single shot. Bancroft nodded slowly. I'm familiar with hybrid warfare concepts. Ghost Fleet takes it several steps further, Ava continued. The architects of the program understood that to counter these threats, we needed assets that could operate in that same gray zone. Assets that were completely deniable, that had no official connection to the United States government or military. People who could conduct operations that would never be acknowledged, using resources that officially don't exist. Illegal operations, Bancroft said flatly. Operations that exist outside the normal framework of military engagement. Ava corrected carefully. Everything Ghost Fleet does is authorized at the highest levels of government, but through mechanisms that don't appear in any public record. The program operates under a series of presidential directives that have been renewed and expanded by every administration since its inception, regardless of party. It has oversight, but that oversight is so compartmentalized that even the congressional intelligence committees don't receive detailed briefings. Bancroft's jaw tightened. You're describing a program that operates outside democratic accountability. I'm describing a program that operates within a different framework of accountability, Ava said. One that recognizes that some threats can't be countered through conventional means. Admiral, you've commanded forces in combat. You know that the clean rules of engagement we teach at the Academy don't always apply in the real world. Ghost Fleet exists for situations that fall through the cracks, the operations that are necessary but that can never be officially sanctioned. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Outside, the simulated rain continued to fall, each digital drop perfect and predictable in a way that the real world never was. Tell me about the fleet itself, he finally said. The name implies naval assets, ships that don't officially exist. Ava nodded. Among other things, Ghost Fleet maintains a network of vessels, aircraft, and facilities that aren't listed in any military inventory. Some of them are modified civilian ships purchased through shell corporations. Others are older military assets that were officially decommissioned but were actually transferred to Ghost Fleet's control. They're maintained in classified facilities, crewed by personnel who officially work for defense contractors or private security companies. Jesus Christ, Bancroft muttered. How many assets are we talking about? That information is compartmented above this conversation's clearance level, Ava said. What I can tell you is that Ghost Fleet has global reach. We've conducted operations in every major maritime region, often under the noses of hostile nations who had no idea we were there. The vessels are designed to blend in. They look like cargo ships, fishing trawlers, research vessels, luxury yachts. But they're equipped with surveillance systems, defensive weapons, and in some cases, offensive capabilities that rival anything in the official fleet. Bancroft leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. And the personnel? How many people are read into this program? Fewer than 200 with full operational knowledge, Ava said. Most Ghost Fleet personnel are compartmented. They know their specific role, but not the broader picture. The pilots who fly our aircraft think they're working for a defense contractor on classified projects. The technical crews who maintain our ships believe they're supporting CIA operations. Only the core operational group, the people like me, understand the full scope of what we're doing. What do you do, Lieutenant? Bancroft asked. What's your specific role in all this? Ava hesitated. This was where the conversation entered truly dangerous territory. Even with the clearance codes and security protocols, there were limits to what she could reveal. She chose her words with surgical precision. I'm what Ghost Fleet calls a coordinator, she said. My official role, the logistics work, the signals analysis, gives me access to naval communication systems and intelligence databases without raising suspicion. I can monitor fleet movements, track personnel assignments, identify potential security breaches. But my real job is to facilitate Ghost Fleet operations by ensuring that our activities remain invisible within the noise of normal military operations. You're a spy, Bancroft said bluntly. You're spying on your own Navy. I'm an intelligence officer doing exactly what intelligence officers are supposed to do, collecting information and ensuring operational security. Ava replied evenly. The difference is that I'm doing it for a program that most of the Navy doesn't know exists. Admiral, every time Ghost Fleet conduct an operation, we risk exposure. A sailor might notice something unusual in a communication log. An analyst might spot a pattern in ship movements that doesn't match official records. Part of my job is to identify those moments before they become problems. And if someone gets too close to discovering Ghost Fleet, what happens then? Ava met his gaze steadily. We have protocols for managing security risks. Usually, it's just a matter of misdirection, feeding the curious investigator information that leads them away from the truth. Sometimes we transfer personnel who are asking too many questions to assignments where they'll be too busy to pursue their suspicions. In rare cases, what? Bancroft pressed. In rare cases, we make the problem go away through other means, Ava said quietly. But it's never our first option, and it's never done lightly. Ghost Fleet doesn't eliminate American service members. Admiral, we're not monsters. But we do have ways of ensuring that operational security is maintained. The rain outside intensified on the screen, thunder rumbling through hidden speakers. Bancroft stood again, pacing the small confines of the conference room, like a caged animal. Ava could see him processing everything, his military mind trying to fit this new information into his existing framework of understanding. Why are you telling me this? He finally asked. Why blow your cover to a random admiral conducting what was supposed to be a routine evaluation? Because this isn't routine evaluation, Ava said. And you're not a random admiral. Sir, Ghost Fleet doesn't reveal itself unless there's a compelling operational reason. The fact that you were given access to my complete file, the fact that I'm authorized to brief you on the program, it means something has changed. Something significant enough that the leadership has decided you need to know. Bancroft stopped pacing and turned to face her. What's changed? I don't have the full picture, Ava admitted. I'm operational level, not command. But based on the timing and the protocols being used, my assessment is that Ghost Fleet is about to expand its operations significantly. We're either facing a major new threat that requires additional assets and oversight, or we're preparing for an operation that's large enough to risk detection by conventional intelligence channels. And I'm being read in because you're being considered for a command position related to Ghost Fleet activities, Ava said. That's my assessment, anyway. The evaluation wasn't about me, Admiral. It was about you. They wanted to see how you'd react when you discovered the program's existence. Whether you'd panic, whether you'd try to go over proper channels to verify, whether you'd reject the entire concept out of hand. Bancroft's expression darkened. I was being tested. We were both being tested. Ava corrected. I was being evaluated on my ability to handle the disclosure. You were being evaluated on your ability to process classified information that contradicts your understanding of how the Navy operates. Based on your reaction so far, I'd say you pass. And if I'd refused to accept this or try to blow the whistle, Ava's expression remained neutral. Then this conversation would have gone very differently, and you would have found yourself reassigned to a position where Ghost Fleet could keep a close eye on you until you retired. The program protects itself, Admiral. Always. The briefing materials arrived 30 minutes later, delivered by a courier Ava recognized from Ghost Fleet's Internal Security Division. The young woman wore a civilian suit and carried credentials identifying her as a staffer from the Office of Naval Intelligence, but Ava knew her real affiliation. They exchanged a brief glance. No words, just a subtle nod that confirmed everything was proceeding according to plan, before the courier departed, leaving behind a sealed case that required both Ava's and Bancroft's biometric authentication to open. The Admiral stared at the case like it might contain a bomb, which, in a metaphorical sense, it probably did. Information was always more dangerous than explosives, especially information that could reshape your understanding of global security operations. Once we open this, Bancroft said slowly, there's no going back. Is that what you're telling me? That's exactly what I'm telling you, Ava confirmed. Whatever is in that case represents your official read-in to Ghost Fleet operations. From this moment forward, you'll be bound by security protocols that supersede anything else in your career. You'll know things that you can never discuss with your colleagues, your friends, or your family. You'll make decisions that could affect the lives of thousands of people, but you'll never be able to explain or justify those decisions to anyone outside the program. Bancroft's hands hovered over the biometric scanner. And if I refuse, if I walk out of this room right now and tell whoever's pulling the strings that I want no part of this, then you'll be thanked for your time, given a plausible cover story for today's meeting, and transferred to a comfortable but meaningless advisory position until you age out active service, Ava said without hesitation. Ghost Fleet doesn't force people into the program, Admiral. The work is too sensitive, requires too much trust. Everyone who's read and chooses to be there. But you'll make damn sure I can't talk about what I've already learned. We'll make damn sure you understand the consequences of violating your security oaths, Ava corrected, which you already signed years ago when you received your first top-secret clearance. Nothing about this conversation has technically exceeded what you're already obligated to keep secret. We've just given you context you didn't previously have. Bancroft absorbed this, his expression unreadable. Then, with the decisiveness that had defined his entire military career, he placed his hand on the scanner. Let's see what you people think is worth all this cloak and dagger nonsense. Ava added her own biometric authentication, and the case unlocked with a soft click. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, were 3 items. A tablet computer with Ghost Fleet's distinctive encrypted interface, a thin manila folder marked with the same crimson seal that had appeared in Ava's personnel file, and a small black box that Ava recognized as a secure communication device. She powered up the tablet while Bancroft opened the folder. His eyes widened as he began reading, the color draining from his face for the second time that day. "This can't be right," he muttered, flipping through pages with increasing urgency. "These photographs, these intelligence assessments, this is saying that China has developed a new class of submarine that's virtually undetectable by our current sonar systems." Ava finished for him. and that they've been conducting surveillance operations along the West Coast for the past 8 months without being identified by any official Navy assets. Bancroft looked up from the folder, his expression a mixture of horror and disbelief. How is that possible? We have the most sophisticated anti-submarine warfare capabilities in the world. Our detection networks span the entire Pacific. There's no way a foreign submarine, even a quiet one, could operate off California without being spotted. Except they have been, Ava said, turning the tablet to show him a series of surveillance images. These photographs were taken by Ghost Fleet assets operating under civilian cover. That a Type 096 Gene-class ballistic missile submarine, but with modifications that our intelligence community didn't know existed until 6 weeks ago. The Chinese have developed some kind of acoustic masking technology. We're still trying to understand the physics, but preliminary analysis suggests they've found a way to blend their acoustic signature with ambient ocean noise. She swiped to the next image, which showed what appeared to be a cargo ship. This is one of ours. The Pacific Star, officially a container vessel registered in Panama, actually a Ghost Fleet surveillance platform. We've been tracking these submarines since they first appeared in our operational areas. They're conducting reconnaissance on our naval bases, mapping the ocean floor, testing our response times. And because they're invisible to conventional detection systems, the official Navy has no idea they're even there. Bancroft's hands were shaking again as he set down the folder. Why wasn't this intelligence shared through normal channels? Why keep it siloed in Ghost Fleet? Because of how we obtained it, Ava explained. The Pacific Star was operating in international waters, but it was conducting surveillance that would be difficult to justify under the normal rules of engagement. We were using active sonar in patterns that could be interpreted as aggressive. We were deploying underwater drones in areas where Chinese vessels had legitimate reasons to be. If the intelligence community had been asked to authorize those operations through official channels, the request would have been denied. Too risky, too likely to create a diplomatic incident. So Ghost Fleet just went ahead and did it anyway. Ghost Fleet did what was necessary to protect American security interests, Ava said firmly. And now we have intelligence that could prevent a catastrophic intelligence failure. The official Navy doesn't know about these submarines, Admiral, which means our defensive posture is based on incomplete information. Our carrier groups are vulnerable. Our strategic planning is flawed. And every day that passes without addressing this threat is a day that China gains more intelligence about our capabilities and our vulnerabilities. Bancroft picked up the secure communication device, turning it over in his hands. And this, let me guess, a direct line to whoever's really running this operation? That's your command link, Ava said. If you agree to move forward, you'll be designated as Theater Commander for Ghost Fleet Pacific Operations. You'll maintain your official role as a senior admiral conducting evaluation reviews and strategic assessments. But your real job will be coordinating Ghost Fleet activities in the Pacific Theater. You'll have operational authority over assets and personnel that don't officially exist, conducting missions that will never be acknowledged. How many people will I be commanding? Approximately 40 Ghost Fleet operatives in the Pacific region, plus support personnel who aren't fully read in, Ava said. You'll also have access to 5 vessels, 3 aircraft, and a network of shore facilities that are hidden within legitimate commercial and military installations. Your communications will be encrypted and compartmentalized. Your orders will come from a command structure that I'm not authorized to fully describe, but which includes senior civilian leadership and select members of the Joint Chiefs. Bancroft stood and walked to the false window again, staring out at the simulated storm. The rain was beginning to ease, the thunder growing distant, a programmed weather pattern designed to mirror the emotional arc of difficult conversations. Ava wondered who designed that particular psychological touch. Probably someone with a PhD in behavioral science and too much time on their hands. Tell me about the current operation, Bancroft said without turning around. The one you're working on right now. I want to understand what I'd actually be doing if I accept this position. Ava hesitated, then activated a secure partition on the tablet. Operation Phantom Wake. It's a surveillance and interdiction mission targeting a Chinese intelligence vessel that's currently operating near the Hawaiian Islands. The vessel is disguised as a commercial fishing trawler, but it's actually equipped with advanced electronic warfare systems. We believe they're mapping our submarine communication cables and possibly even attempting to tap into them. She brought up a tactical display showing the waters northeast of Oahu. Ghost Fleet has positioned 2 assets in the area. A recreational diving boat that's actually a signals intelligence platform, and a commercial yacht that's serving as a coordination hub. We've been shadowing the Chinese vessel for 3 weeks, collecting intelligence on their capabilities and procedures. And the interdiction part, Bancroft asked. We're planning to disable their electronic warfare systems using a targeted cyber attack, Ava said. Nothing permanent. Nothing that would cause casualties, just enough disruption to force them to return to port for repairs. It will look like a technical malfunction, but it will effectively end their surveillance operation and send a message that we know what they're doing without creating an official diplomatic incident. Because officially we have no idea they're even there. Exactly, Ava confirmed. The operation is scheduled to commence in 72 hours. If you accept the command position, you'll be overseeing the final phase of execution. Bancroft was silent for a long moment, processing everything. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with the weight of difficult decisions. I've spent my entire career following the rules, Lieutenant. I've commanded by the book, fought within established parameters, respected the chain of command. What you're describing, what Ghost Fleet does, it goes against everything I was taught about military service. Does it? Ava challenged gently. Or does it represent the natural evolution of military service in an age where our enemies don't follow the rules we've established? Admiral, you've commanded forces in combat. You've made decisions that cost lives to save more lives. You've operated in gray areas where the textbook answers didn't apply. Ghost Fleet is just an extension of that reality, a recognition that some threats can only be countered by operating outside the conventional framework. Bancroft turned to face her, and Ava saw the internal struggle playing out in his expression. This was the moment that mattered, the moment when a career officer had to decide whether his commitment to serving his country extended beyond the comfortable certainty of official operations. If I do this, he said slowly, if I take on this command, I need guarantees. I need to know that Ghost Fleet has proper oversight, that there are limits to what we can do, that we're not just a rogue operation accountable to no one. Ghost Fleet operates under presidential authority, Ava said. Every major operation requires approval from an oversight committee that includes the Secretary of Defense, the Director of National Intelligence, and selected members of the National Security Council. We're not a rogue operation, Admiral. We're a classified operation with a different chain of command, but we're still accountable to civilian leadership. And the operations that aren't major, the day-to-day activities that don't rise to the level of requiring presidential approval, those are conducted under standing authorities that are reviewed and renewed annually. Ava said, we have rules of engagement, legal guidelines, operational constraints. The difference is that those rules are classified and compartmentalized, not subject to public scrutiny or congressional oversight in the traditional sense. But they exist and they're enforced. Bancroft picked up the secure communication device again, his thumb hovering over the activation button. You know what troubles me most about all this? It's not the secrecy. It's not even the legal gray areas. It's the idea that there's an entire dimension of military operations that most people in the Navy, hell, most people in the Pentagon, don't even know exists. It creates a 2-tiered system where some people are operating with complete information and others are making decisions based on a sanitized version of reality. That's not unique to Ghost Fleet, Ava pointed out. Every classified program creates information asymmetry. The only difference here is the scale and the stakes. But you're right that it's troubling. It's one of the ethical challenges that every Ghost Fleet operator has to reconcile. We're protecting people who don't know they need protection, conducting operations that can never be acknowledged, making sacrifices that will never be recognized. It requires a certain kind of person to do that work without losing yourself in the process. And you think I'm that kind of person? I think you're being given the opportunity to find out, Ava said. No one can make this decision for you, Admiral. But I can tell you that the threat is real, the need is genuine, and the work matters. What Ghost Fleet does, what we would do under your command, directly impact American security in ways that won't be understood for decades. Maybe never if we do our jobs right. The rain had stopped on the screen outside, leaving behind the gray, overcast sky that often followed East Coast storms. Bancroft looked at his reflection in the false window, as if trying to see who he would become if he pressed that activation button. Then, with the decisiveness that had earned him 4 stars, he activated the device. A moment later, a voice came through, distorted by encryption, impossible to identify, but carrying undeniable authority. Admiral Bancroft, welcome to Ghost Fleet. Your oath of service just took on new meaning. Are you ready to proceed? Bancroft met Ava's eyes across the room, and she saw acceptance there. Not enthusiasm, not blind allegiance, but the hard-won acceptance of a warrior who understood that the real world rarely offered clean choices. I'm ready, he said into the device. Let's get to work. 3 weeks later, Lieutenant Ava Hart stood on the deck of a recreational diving boat called the Moonlight Dancer, watching the sun set over the Pacific Ocean 30 miles northeast of Oahu. The vessel rolled gently in the swells, its outward appearance carefully maintained to match that of hundreds of other tourist boats that operated in Hawaiian waters. But below deck, behind panels that looked like standard marine equipment, was surveillance technology that would make most intelligence agencies envious. Operation Phantom Wake had been executed flawlessly. The Chinese intelligence vessel, officially the fishing trawler Hailong, actually the signals intelligence platform Jiangnan 7, had experienced what appeared to be a catastrophic failure of its electronic warfare systems 48 hours ago. The failure had occurred during a routine surveillance pass near the submarine communication cables and had been severe enough to require the vessel to return to port in Shanghai for repairs that would take months. More importantly, the failure had been so clearly technical in nature that Chinese naval intelligence had no grounds to suspect American interference. The cyber attack had been designed to mimic the kind of electrical cascade failure that occasionally occurred in older maritime electronics. Plausible, explainable, and completely deniable. From Ghost Fleet's perspective, the operation had achieved every objective. The surveillance mission was terminated. Chinese technical staff would waste months trying to understand what had gone wrong with their systems, and the United States had gained valuable intelligence on Chinese electronic warfare capabilities without creating an international incident. Admiral Bancroft had overseen the final phase of the operation from a command center hidden within a supposedly decommissioned communications facility on Oahu. Ava had watched him adapt to Ghost Fleet's operational protocols with impressive speed, his conventional military experience translating surprisingly well to the shadowy world of deniable operations. He'd asked hard questions, demanded clear justifications for every tactical decision, and pushed back when he thought the risk-reward calculation was off. But he'd also shown the flexibility to operate outside the rigid structures of conventional command, trusting his operational team to execute their specialized roles without micromanagement. Now, as the Moonlight Dancer prepared to return to port and resume its cover as a legitimate dive charter service, Ava was conducting her own after-action assessment. The operation had gone smoothly, but smooth operations were sometimes more dangerous than difficult ones. They created complacency, an assumption that success was inevitable. Ghost Fleet survived by maintaining constant paranoia, always assuming that the next operation might be the one where their cover was blown. Her secure phone vibrated, a message from Bancroft requesting a meeting at a coffee shop in Honolulu the next morning. Not a Ghost Fleet facility, not a secure location, just a public space where 2 Navy personnel might plausibly cross paths. That was Bancroft's style. He preferred face-to-face conversations for anything that mattered, even when secure communications were available. The next morning, Ava found him at a corner table of a Kona coffee shop frequented by military personnel and tourists. He was in civilian clothes, khaki pants and a navy polo shirt, looking more like a retired executive than a 4-star admiral who'd just overseen a classified operation. Ava wore running gear, the universal uniform of off-duty military personnel trying to maintain fitness standards. "Lieutenant," he greeted her, gesturing to the empty chair. "Coffee's on me. You look like you could use it." Ava accepted gratefully, settling into the chair with the practiced casualness of someone who'd been trained to have covert conversations in public spaces. The key was to look completely natural, just two people having coffee. Nothing remarkable or memorable about their meeting. Operation Phantom Wake has been officially closed, Bancroft said quietly, his voice low enough that it wouldn't carry beyond their table. The after-action reports have been filed, the assets have been repositioned, and the cover stories have been reinforced. By all measures, it was a textbook execution. But, Ava prompted, hearing the unspoken concern in his tone. But I'm troubled by something that came up during the intelligence debrief. Bancroft said, the Chinese vessel, the Jiangnan 7, it wasn't just conducting routine surveillance. Analysis of the data we collected suggests they were testing something, running experiments with their electronic warfare systems in patterns that don't match standard intelligence gathering procedures. Ava's attention sharpened. What kind of experiments? We're not entirely sure, Bancroft admitted, but the pattern analysis suggests they were attempting to identify vulnerabilities in our submarine communication systems, not just mapping the cables, which we expected, but actually try to find ways to disrupt or intercept the communications flowing through them. If they succeed in developing that capability, it would compromise one of our most critical strategic assets, Ava finished. Admiral, this sounds like it goes beyond Ghost Fleet's operational mandate. This is the kind of intelligence that needs to be shared with Cyber Command, with the NSA, with organizations that will ask how we obtain intelligence, Bancroft interrupted, which brings us back to the fundamental problem of Ghost Fleet's existence. We gather intelligence that's vitally important, but we can't always share it through official channels without revealing our methods and capabilities. They sat in silence for a moment, both grappling with the ethical complexity of their situation. A young couple at the next table laughed at something on their phone, completely oblivious to the conversation about national security happening 3 feet away. There are protocols to this, Ava said finally. Ways to sanitize the intelligence. Make it appear as if it came from authorized collection platforms. It's not ideal, but it's better than letting critical information go unused. I'm aware of the protocols, Bancroft said. I've already initiated the sanitization process. But it made me think about the larger implications of what we're doing. How much intelligence is Ghost Fleet sitting on that hasn't been shared because it can't be adequately sanitized? How many threats are we aware of that the rest of the national security community is blind to? That's above my clearance level, Ava said carefully. But based on my operational experience, I guess that Ghost Fleet maintains intelligence on dozens of threats that haven't been fully shared with conventional channels. It's one of the program's core functions, to operate in areas where official assets can't go, collecting information that can't be officially acknowledged. Bancroft's jaw tightened. I understand the logic. I even accept the necessity. But it doesn't sit easy with me, Lieutenant. The idea that I'm now part of a system that withholds critical intelligence from people who have a legitimate need to know, who are making decisions based on incomplete information. Welcome to Ghost Fleet, Ava said with a slight smile. That moral ambiguity you're feeling, it doesn't go away. You just get better at living with it. A server approached to refill their coffee, and they paused the conversation, both slipping into bland small talk about the weather and the quality of Hawaiian coffee. The server left, and they waited another 30 seconds before resuming. I've been thinking about the bigger picture, Bancroft said, about what Ghost Fleet represents in the evolution of American military power. We're not the first program to operate in legal gray areas, and we won't be the last. But I wonder if we've crossed a threshold that's difficult to come back from. Once you establish a system where classified operations can be conducted with minimal oversight, where does it end? What prevents Ghost Fleet from becoming exactly the kind of rogue operation that you assured me it isn't? The people, Ava said simply, Ghost Fleet works because it recruits people who have strong moral compasses, who understand that power without accountability is tyranny. Every operator I've worked with has struggled with the same questions you're asking. We're all constantly evaluating whether what we're doing serves a greater good or just serves the system that employs us. And when those two things come into conflict, then we make hard choices, Ava said. Sometimes we push back on orders we think are unjustified. Sometimes we refuse to participate in operations that cross ethical lines. Ghost Fleet isn't a monolithic entity, Admiral. It's made up of individuals who bring their own judgment and values to the work. That's our only real safeguard against becoming the thing we're trying to protect against. Bancroft nodded slowly, processing this. I've been offered an extension of my command, he said, changing the subject slightly. The authorization came through the secure channel yesterday. Instead of the 6-month evaluation period we discussed, they wanted to take on a 2-year commitment to Ghost Fleet Pacific operations. Apparently, the Chinese submarine situation is more complex than we initially understood, and they want consistent leadership to address it. Congratulations, Ava said, meaning it. Will you accept? I already did, Bancroft admitted. God help me, I already said yes. Because as much as this work troubles me, as much as I question the ethics and the secrecy and the whole damn system, I can't walk away knowing what I know. I can't go back to conventional command and pretend that I'm unaware of threats that Ghost Fleet is tracking. So I'm in. For better or worse, I'm committed to this program. Ava felt a mixture of relief and sympathy. Relief because Bancroft was a good officer who would bring integrity to Ghost Fleet operations, and sympathy because she knew exactly what he was going through. That moment when you realize you cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. There's something else you should know, Bancroft said, his voice dropping even lower. I've been authorized to expand Ghost Fleet's operational capacity in the Pacific. We're bringing in additional assets, recruiting new operators, establishing new cover identities. The assessment from command is that we're entering a period of intensified competition with China, and Ghost Fleet needs to be postured for more aggressive operations. How aggressive? Ava asked, feeling a chill despite the warm Hawaiian morning. That remains to be defined, Bancroft said. But the preliminary guidance I've received suggests we may be moving beyond surveillance and intelligence gathering. There's talk of disruption operations, of preemptively degrading Chinese capabilities before they can be deployed, of establishing a more active defense posture that would involve, well, let's just say it would involve actions that push the boundaries of what we previously considered acceptable. Ava absorbed this information, understanding its implications. Ghost Fleet had always operated in gray areas, but there was a difference between passive intelligence collection and active operations designed to degrade an adversary's capabilities. The former was defensible as necessary security measures. The latter came dangerously close to acts of war, conducted without official authorization or oversight. Admiral, that sounds like a significant escalation. Has there been a comprehensive legal review? What about the Oversight Committee? Have they approved this expansion of authorities? The legal review is ongoing, Bancroft said. And yes, the Oversight Committee has provided provisional approval, pending more detailed operational planning. But you're right to be concerned, Lieutenant. This represents a fundamental shift in Ghost Fleet's mission profile. We're moving from being eyes and ears to being hands and fists. And that changes everything about the kind of program we are. They sat in silence again, both contemplating the implications. Ava thought about the operation they just completed, the careful planning, the precise execution, the satisfaction of a mission accomplished without anyone getting hurt, without creating an international incident. That kind of operation felt justifiable, defensible even if it could never be officially acknowledged. But what Bancroft was describing sounded different, more aggressive, more likely to result in consequences that couldn't be predicted or controlled. She thought about the Chinese sailors aboard the Jiangnan 7, going about their duties unaware that an invisible American force had just disabled their systems. They'd been frustrated and confused, but they'd been safe. Would that still be true in Ghost Fleet's expanded operational framework? I want you on my staff, Bancroft said suddenly. I'm authorized to build a core team for Pacific operations, and I want people who will ask hard questions, who won't just execute orders blindly. You've been with Ghost Fleet long enough to understand its culture and capabilities, but you're not so indoctrinated that you've lost the ability to question whether we should do something just because we can. Ava hadn't expected this. Admiral, I'm a coordinator, not a command-level operator. I work behind the scenes, facilitating operations, but not directing them. What you're describing sounds like you want me in a strategic planning role, which isn't really my area of expertise. You're wrong about that, Bancroft said firmly. You've been operating at a strategic level since the moment you helped manage my read-in to the program. You evaluated the situation, determined what information I needed, and guided the conversation in ways that served Ghost Fleet's interests while respecting my autonomy as an officer. That's strategic thinking, Lieutenant, and it's exactly what I need on my staff. What would the assignment entail? You'd be my liaison to Ghost Fleet's operational elements throughout the Pacific Theater, Bancroft explained. Coordinating between different asset groups, ensuring that operations don't create conflicts or expose our presence, managing the intelligence flow between Ghost Fleet and conventional channels. It would mean more responsibility, more visibility within the program, and probably more ethical ambiguity than you're currently dealing with. Can I think about it? Ava asked. Of course, Bancroft said. Take a week. Talk to your current handlers. Consider whether this is a direction you want your career to go. But understand that we're at an inflection point, both for Ghost Fleet and for American security in the Pacific. The decisions we make in the next year will shape naval operations for decades. I'd like you to be part of that process. They finished their coffee making small talk about inconsequential things. The diving conditions off Oahu, the best restaurant in Honolulu, whether the current Navy football team had a chance at winning the Commander-in-Chief's trophy. To anyone watching, they were just two service members enjoying a morning off. Nothing remarkable about their conversation or their demeanor. But as Ava walked back to her rental car, she felt the weight of everything that had been discussed. She joined Ghost Fleet because she believed in its mission, because she understood that sometimes protecting democracy required operating outside democratic processes. But she'd always assumed there were clear boundaries, bright lines that separated necessary security measures from actions that fundamentally changed who we were as a nation. Now those boundaries seemed less clear. The lines were blurring, and she wasn't sure whether that was a necessary adaptation to new threats or a dangerous slide toward becoming the kind of unchecked power that free societies were supposed to prevent. Her secure phone buzzed again. A message from her current handler requesting a debrief on her conversation with Bancroft. Ghost Fleet watched its own operatives as carefully as it watched potential threats, ensuring that no one went rogue, that everyone remained committed to the program's core values even as those values were tested by operational realities. Ava composed a brief response confirming she'd received Bancroft's offer and would need time to consider it. Then she drove back to her apartment, a modest one-bedroom in a complex popular with junior officers, and sat on her balcony overlooking the ocean. Somewhere out there, beyond the tourist beaches and the cruise ships and the Navy vessels conducting their official exercises, Ghost Fleet was operating, invisible ships crewed by invisible people, conducting missions that would never be acknowledged, protecting interests that most Americans would never know were threatened. And she was part of that system, for better or worse. She'd chosen to be one of those invisible people, operating in the shadows to protect the light. The question was whether she was ready to take on more responsibility in that shadow world, to move from facilitating operations to helping shape them. It was one thing to execute missions designed by others. It was another to be part of the strategic planning that determined what missions were even undertaken. As the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if they weren't so ephemeral, Ava Hart made her decision. She would accept Bancroft's offer, not because she was certain it was the right choice, but because uncertainty was no excuse for avoiding responsibility. If Ghost Fleet was going to expand its operations, if it was going to push boundaries and test limits, then it needed people within the system who would push back when those boundaries were pushed too far. She would be one of those people. She would ask the hard questions, challenge the assumptions, and fight to ensure that Ghost Fleet remained what was supposed to be a necessary tool for protecting American security, not an unaccountable power operating beyond any meaningful constraint. It wouldn't be easy. There would be operations she disagreed with, decisions that troubled her conscience, moments when she questioned whether the ends truly justified the means. But that was the burden of operating in the shadows. You had to be willing to carry that weight, even when it felt unbearable. Ava picked up her phone and composed a message to Bancroft. Admiral, I've considered your offer. I'm in. When do we start? The response came back almost immediately. Tomorrow. Welcome to the deep end. Lieutenant, try not to drown. She smiled at that, appreciating his dark humor. Then she went inside to pack, because tomorrow she would report to Ghost Fleet Pacific Command, and her career, her life, would never be the same. The game had changed. The stakes had been raised. And Lieutenant Ava Hart was ready to play her part in protecting a world that would never know she existed.